So I've been thinking a lot about the COVID pandemic now that it's abated a bit, and there's some space in the mind to do that. And of course, it's very clear when we experience something like the pandemic, we understand the pain and suffering and the losses that many experienced. Thinking about it superficially, it seems like it's only a negative phenomena that happens, this one solid thing that happened. However, if we look deeper and think about all the causes and conditions that created the pandemic, and then all of the results that also become new causes and conditions, we can begin to appreciate how complicated and far-reaching something like a pandemic is. The results are very vast and sometimes bring very surprising results. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says in Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature, only a Buddha can know the intricacies of karma, which include how karma affects the evolution of a world system and the sentient life in it. For us limited beings, it is hard to know where natural laws stop and the law of karma takes over, where the law of karma stops and natural laws take over, and where the two influence each other. So I came across an article that illustrates a surprising change due to the effects of COVID on the workforce. So this was a NPR story, and I'll read a little bit of it. It reads, "The red-hot labor market has employers recruiting furiously for workers and considering applicants they might have passed on before. There is evidence that businesses are opening up positions for people with criminal convictions on their records." An example is Brandy White, who lives just outside Pittsburgh, and when she returned last summer from 7 years in prison, she figured she'd be locked out of her previous career in patient care, which was painful to think about. She said, "My passion is to help people, and I didn't think it was ever possible again." When released, Brandy White got a job on a chocolate factory assembly line that was not a fulfilling job at all for her. Eventually, she enrolled in a job training program to see if she could find fulfilling work elsewhere. She was surprised when the program staff told her Pittsburgh's biggest health system was looking for employees just like her. She asked the program staff, "Do they know about my drug charge?" They did, and they had to keep reassuring her because it just didn't seem real to her. So Brandy started out as a patient care technician at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center Hospital last month. A spokesperson for the medical center said, "We have 14,000 unfilled positions." 14,000. At the current moment that we are trying to recruit for, so we need to get creative. You know, for us, it's about making sure that people who have barriers to work can see a future with us. So this is a direct result, I believe, from the experience of COVID and how it impacted those institutions that tried to help people and experience so much death. And you know, you go through something like that and it kind of opens your mind, I think. You know, death is a great equalizer. And so they're thinking now about how important it is to have workers to be able to take care of people. And so they're looking many places now. Here's another example. Amy Kroll had witnessed this shift from inside the Allegheny County Jail in Pittsburgh, where she runs a reentry service. She remembers getting a call last summer from a business owner. I was like, "Do you know you're calling Allegheny County Jail?" He kind of chuckled and said, "Yes, I do, but I have multiple vacancies and you have young men and women down there, and I need to fill these vacancies." Kroll said she soon got similar requests from manufacturing plants, construction firms, and restaurants, and there are signs that it is a national trend. So there's a man named Harley Blakeman who owns Honest Jobs. It's an online platform for applicants with criminal records. And he says, we have actually had job candidates on our site apply for 3 jobs, get 2 offers, and then be able to choose between one or the other. I think that's a dynamic that probably never existed before for formerly incarcerated job seekers. And so think about that for a minute. You know, I've written and had letters from so many folks in prison that their release time is coming up and they are so freaked out. They don't have any resources. Their family has thrown them away. They don't know what they're going to do. But if they could tap into these reentry programs and have an actual plan, you know, and then have more than one job to pick from, I mean, you know, that's just astounding to me. So this Harley Blakeman says that their clients are not just getting better pay and benefits, but they also have better chance of landing jobs where they can see a future for themselves. Look how important that is. So here's an example of a fellow named Dejan Arnett, who just started as a prep cook at a restaurant. He says he wanted to become a chef even before he was released from prison last fall. And here's how he speaks about this. He says, I plan to be all over this kitchen stuff. So yeah, this is a real big step for me. That's one thing that's key with me. If I really enjoy where I'm at, you ain't never going to worry about me. So that was probably one problem I had when I was 18 or 19. I really didn't get the big picture. Here's another example. After spending 27 years in prison, Kent Brewer looks forward to going to work every day, where he sees green, open spaces, and people are like family. He's 69 now, and he's a full-time employee at Chettleham Veterans Cemetery in southern Prince George's County. His job is made possible through a partnership between Maryland's Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services and the Department of Veterans Affairs to hire honorably discharged veterans who are incarcerated to work at state veterans cemeteries once they are released. So again, you know, this connection between getting people when they're still in prison some job training so that when they get out, they just slide right into, you know, whatever the job is. And that's what happened to this fellow. So once they complete their pre-release program, they're hired full-time at a state veterans cemetery. And just in Maryland, there's 5 of those. And so they do things like landscaping, lawn mowing, groundskeeping, and cemetery restoration. And so, you know, they're working for the state. So, you know, good benefits and, you know, something that's going to last a while and be, you know, fulfilling for people. This fellow, Brewer, he served in the Coast Guard during Vietnam. And not long after his enlistment, he was medically discharged. He faced difficulties with substance abuse, was in and out of prison, and at the age of 43, pleaded guilty to a murder he committed during an argument while high on drugs. He served 27 years in prison. He says, when you're on drugs, the only thing that matters is what you can do to satisfy your addiction. I learned that in prison, people matter. Your family matters, and strangers matter. It just dawned on me that when he said, and kind of thinking to himself, what you've done is wrong, it's terrible, and you have to straighten out. And that's the effort I've been putting into this. So while in prison, Brewer became a tutor to help others in prison learn how to read and write, joined a Quaker community, and helped train service dogs through a program that provides dogs to wounded veterans. He says that he applies his work ethic to his job every day and hopes to work at the cemetery for a long time. I know I have somewhere to go every day. It's been a blessing, he says. So some worry that these opportunities will fade when the labor market cools, but advocates for second chance hiring think formerly incarcerated people can avert that outcome by proving themselves in the jobs that they have today. And we can just hear from these people how they're talking. You know they're going to do their very best. It's just very clear. So here's some statistics. Every year, roughly 5 million people are released from jail. 5 million people. Another 500,000 leave prison. So a lot of states send those released home with some funds in their pockets. It's called gate money, at least maybe for bus fare and a meal. When a person leaves a correctional facility, they often receive their funds. So if they have wages earned while behind bars, which is not very much, but or support from family members, or the money that they had in their possession when they got arrested. What they do, many of these penitentiaries, they put the money that they have on these fee-laden prepaid debt cards. So we know a little bit about that. When we got our refund from the government, from the IRS during COVID, stimulus, yeah. So that money, I got one of those debt cards. It took me a couple hours to figure out how to get that money off that debt card into my bank account. And I have a computer. I'm fairly savvy with these kinds of things, I think. Now think about somebody coming out of prison after 27 years and they hand them their money in this debt card. These debt cards are from a couple of companies that supposedly give services to inmates, but I'll tell you, these debt cards, if the person doesn't get the money off of there, after 5 days, they start taking fees out of that debt card. And, there's not much on them usually. And so they start, taking their money from them. And the process to try to get that money off is, humongous. So oftentimes what they'll do, they'll buy one big thing and use all their money up, And then when you think about it, starting fresh out of being in a metal cage for 27 years, so to get a first and last month's deposit for an apartment, a cell phone, clean clothes for a job interview, transportation to work, whatever they have isn't going to meet that. Most of these gate monies, the highest in the country that I could find was $200 in California, which is fairly good, but when you start thinking about all the things you need to do to set up your life, it's nothing. Many states do nothing. New Hampshire, they don't give anything. You just, you're out you go. Research says that the first 72 hours after a person is released from prison is the critical time in determining if that person will get on their feet or wind back up in prison. So these reentry programs are so, they're life-saving. They're life-saving. Because it's the difference between landing back in prison or becoming, a member of society, So this world reminds us that our world is experiencing a very devastating pandemic, but it's not all negative. The changes that happened due to the results of the pandemic that opened doors for people who were forgotten, like those who are incarcerated, that's a positive effect. And so we always have to have a very broad, vast mind when we think about all the things that we experience so that we can not miss those things that are beneficial to people in the world today because of something that started out and still is quite horrible. As circumstances change, we always have the opportunity to see where we can step in and help others, build new programs, support groups that have been forgotten in order to improve all of our circumstances. and have this idea that we are all one, common family here. And then we continue to develop our bodhicitta as we continue on the path to full awakening.